In a lakeside mansion where memories float like morning fog, one woman with secrets in her eyes must face the impossible. Isabella Davis stands before her grandmother's will, a document that demands she not only share the house, but also the bed of the man who broke her heart 10 years ago. James Bennett, an arrogant tech millionaire with a soul that is sealed tightly shut, returns to the place he once fled, unaware of the fate that awaits him in the last will of the woman who knew them both better than they knew themselves. What begins as 7 nights of forced intimacy soon turns into whispers under stormy skies, and a passion that neither time nor distance can extinguish. But everything changes when weeks later, 2 pink lines appear on the test dot. Can love born twice, once in youth and again in maturity, survive the final test? And was their meeting a coincidence? Or was it a brilliant plan by a grandmother who refused to let true love disappear forever? From what corner of the world are you listening to this story? Have you ever wondered if the love of your past deserves a second chance? Because this isn't just a story about inheritance and obligation. It's a story about choices that bind us forever, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. Isabella Davis stood frozen in the lawyer's wood-paneled office, her dark, straight hair falling around her face as she stared at the paperwork, stunned. "It's illegal," she whispered, looking up at Mr. Pearson, her late grandmother's lawyer. "You mean I have to spend 7 nights in a row in the same house with James Bennett as a co-owner of the estate," Mr. Pearson confirmed, adjusting his glasses. "Your grandmother's will is very specific. In order to receive your shares, the bookstore for you, the investment portfolio from Mr. Bennett, you must live together in her lake house for 1 week. I quote, to settle your absurd quarrel and to honor your family ties." Isabella ran her hand through her hair in despair. Her beloved grandmother's latest joke had been a real test. A week under the same roof with James Bennett, the arrogant millionaire who had once been her childhood friend and then became a stranger. What happens if we refuse? James asked, his voice surprisingly calm as he leaned against the bookshelf dot, unlike Isabella in jeans and a blouse. He was in a perfectly fitting suit that probably cost more than her store in 3 months. "Then all property, including the pink pages and investments, will go to charity," Mr. Pearson replied. Isabella's heart sank. The bookstore had been her grandmother's life's work, a vital hub for the people of Portland. Losing it was unthinkable. "When should we start living together?" she asked. "Tonight. And another thing, separate bedrooms don't count. You have to share the same room." "What?" Isabella and James exclaimed at the same time that Mr. Pearson looked uncomfortable. She thought that this would bring about reconciliation more quickly. Cameras would be installed in the common areas to confirm that the conditions had been met. Personal rooms would remain private. For the first time, James showed emotion by running his hand through his dark hair. "This is absurd. I have a company with over 300 employees. I can't just disappear for a week. Do you think my bookstore can handle itself?" Isabella snapped. "We're opening a children's area next week. I need the inheritance to finish the renovation." Their eyes met, dark brown and piercing green dot, and in this silence the question was already heard. What will happen on the 8th night? The silent battle of wills is an all too familiar feeling. 7 nights, James finally managed, clenching his jaw. Not a day more. The lake house was just as Isabella remembered it, a spacious cedar structure overlooking clear water, with mountains on the horizon like guardians of the past. It had been her favorite place as a child, until one summer changed. "Everything between her and James. Only 1 bedroom is ready," said Mrs. Ricks, the caretaker, with a slight awkwardness as she met them with their suitcases. As Miss Rose requested, Isabella barely suppressed an internal groan. Of course, Her grandmother had thought of everything down to the last detail. James put his expensive leather bag on the floor. I'll take the sofa. The will specifies a common sleeping area, Mrs. Ricks reminded her regretfully. The cameras will record everything. When she left, Isabella looked around the master bedroom with its enormous king-size bed. At least there's enough space, she muttered. This is absurd, James breathed. We're adults. We'll handle this without my godmother interfering from beyond the grave. Says the man who hasn't spoken to me for 10 years? Isabella retorted. Something flashed in his eyes. Regret? Pain? But it immediately disappeared under an icy mask. That's not quite true, he said quietly. I sent flowers when your mother died. The mention of her mother, her grandmother's daughter, knocked the wave of anger from Isabella. Thank you. Lily were her favorite, she admitted. There was a silence, full of unexpressed feelings and words. I have work meetings. James broke the silence, glancing at his watch. I'll take the right side of the bed. I hope you don't mind? I always liked the left one, Isabella replied, surprised that he remembered such little details from those childhood sleepovers in this house. While James set up the temporary office, Isabella walked out to the lake. The sunset turned the water gold. 7 nights. 7 long nights with the man who broke her heart when he left for Stanford without looking back. 7 nights with the boy who once knew her best. Only Grandma couldn't know what it would lead to. Because those 7 nights would result in more than just a reconciliation. They would lead to an unexpected pregnancy and a relationship that would last much longer than a week. Isabella woke up with a start, disoriented by the weight of someone else's arm around her waist. Moonlight flooded the room, illuminating James's sleeping face, just inches away from hers. She froze. No matter how carefully they built the pillow barrier between them, something had changed during the night. Or someone in his sleep. James looked almost defenseless, his features soft, without the usual tension. Long dark eyelashes, light breathing, like the boy she remembered, not the cold-eyed man he had become. Carefully, almost imperceptibly, she tried to slip out of his embrace. His arm reflexively tightened around her. Don't go, he muttered. Stay, Bella. Her childhood nickname, which no one had called for years. A blow to the heart. James, she whispered, wake up. His eyes opened, green and confused, as if for the first time. They looked at each other, breathing in unison, and then reality crashed. In, and he jerked back, nearly falling out of bed. I'm sorry, he muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I didn't? It's okay, Isabella interrupted, clutching the blanket to herself, despite the perfectly decent pajamas she was wearing. Just stick to your side. James looked at his watch. 3:17. I'll go get a drink of water, he said, and quickly left. As if escaping the growing awkwardness, Isabella leaned back against the pillows, listening to the retreating footsteps in the hallway. How can I survive 6 more nights like this? She whispered. The next morning, Mrs. Ricks stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, not believing her eyes. You ... Rearranged everything in my kitchen? Isabella, holding her second cup of coffee, silently pointed at James, who was furiously typing on his laptop without even looking up. The previous organization of space was inefficient. Now everything is grouped for maximum productivity, he said calmly. He couldn't sleep, Isabella explained. Apparently going through other people's things is his way of counting sheep. Mrs. Ricks looked at them, a merry sparkle lighting up the corners of her eyes. Your grandmother would appreciate this, she said, addressing Isabella, but loud enough for James to hear. What would she appreciate? Isabella asked. How similar? You are. You both start fixing the world when you're worried. James's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. We are not alike at all, Isabella objected, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "Oh, really?" Mrs. Ricks nodded toward the living room, where Isabella had spent the night arranging books by genre and color. "It's a very misleading impression." When the nurse left on business, a tense silence fell between them. "I have too." "Stop at the bookstore," Isabella finally said, picking up her purse. "The will doesn't say we can't leave during the day, only that we have to sleep in the house at night." James closed the laptop. "I'll take you." "No need. I need to look around myself." 10 years have passed. On the way to Portland, the cabin was tensely silent. Familiar landscapes flashed past the windows like ghosts from the past. "Why didn't you come back?" Isabella asked suddenly. "After college?" James's hands tightened on the steering wheel. There was nothing to return to. "Your godmother ... friends ... She hesitated. "Me?" He didn't answer right away. "You yourself made it clear where we stood that last August." And then company appeared. Life went on as usual. Isabella turned to face him. "Did I make it clear? You were the one who said that long-distance relationships are not serious and that we need to be realistic." He parked abruptly. The wheels creaking on the asphalt, "I remember it differently." "So you have selective memory," she barked, and jumped out of the car, slamming the door behind her. Rose's bookshop stood where it had stood for the last 30 years. A charming 2-story Victorian, painted a deep purple with gold accents. One look at it, and Isabella's heart found its rhythm again. Too. Her surprise, James followed her in. "Izzy!" Peter, her second-in-command, called from behind the counter. His eyes widened as he spotted James. "Who is this?" "An unexpected guest?" "This is James Bennett," she introduced dryly. "We're dealing with inheritance issues." Recognition flashed in Peter's eyes. "That same James? As in the wall of sad love poems?" Isabella flushed. "Peter ... poems about love?" James asked, with that raised eyebrow she remembered so well. "Customer recommendations," Isabella quickly interjected. "For breakups, a perfectly normal section of the bookstore, except that half of them have personal markings." Peter chuckled, heading off toward the warehouse. James walked slowly through the store, touching the shelves, studying the displays with an inscrutable expression. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said finally. "You kept her dream alive, but you did it your way." The unexpectedness of the compliment threw Isabella off balance. "Thank you," she answered quietly. He stopped at a photograph on the wall. Teenagers. Isabella and James sat on the dock of a lake house, their feet splashing in the water, his arm around her shoulders. "I remember this day," he said quietly. "Your 16th birthday." "The day I taught you to drive," Isabella added, the memory washing over her like a wave. "I almost crashed your father's car into the boathouse." A genuine smile broke James's professional mask. Dad never knew how close it all was ... for a moment. They were just Bella and James again. Childhood friends turned teenage lovers before life. Ambition and misunderstandings tore their bond apart. The bell above the door rang, breaking the magic of the moment. "Mr. Bennett." A stern woman in a business suit ran into the room. "The investors are already on video call." "You didn't answer." "Your calls." James immediately straightened up, his face once again wearing a businesslike mask. "I'll be right there, Carolyn." He turned to Isabella. Duty calls. "Can you make it home?" "I managed somehow without you for 10 years, she answered, more sharply than she intended. "I think I'll find my way now, too." Something like pain flashed in his gaze before he nodded and followed his assistant out. Later, after the store had closed, Isabella returned to the lake house to find James in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up and his tie off, preparing dinner. "Are you cooking now?" she asked in surprise, throwing her keys on the table. "A survival skill," he replied with a grin, stirring something that smelled unexpectedly delicious. When you live alone, you learn it, whether you like it or not. Without a personal chef? I'm shocked. James glanced at her. Contrary to your ideas, Isabella, I don't live like a cartoon villain millionaire. She was embarrassed. I'm sorry. It wasn't fair. Habit, he shrugged. Old reflexes. What are you cooking? Risotto. Your favorite. At least it used to be. It still is, she admitted. It's amazing that you remember. The dinner was unexpectedly warm. They reminisced about harmless moments from the past. Mrs. Rose's terrible voice. The summer they tried to build a raft, and it immediately sank. The ice cream from the store they used to go to as teenagers. Why did you choose a tech company? Isabella asked, clearing away the dishes. You always dreamed of being an architect. James was silent for a moment. Dreams change. After the accident with my parents, I needed something ... more stable. Isabella froze with a towel in her hand. I didn't know. I'm sorry, James. It was 2 years after you left for Stanford. An accident. Dad died immediately. Mom held on for a couple more weeks. Why didn't you call me? There was pain in her voice. You were a freshman at NYU, living your dream. He shrugged. And we weren't even talking then. 10 years of misunderstandings hung between them. I would have come, Isabella said quietly, if I had known ... There. Eyes met across the kitchen, and something in the atmosphere changed, as if a crack had appeared in the walls they had spent so long building. Later that night, as they were getting ready for bed, the awkwardness returned. Isabella emerged from the bathroom in her pajamas to find James making another pillow barrier. This is ridiculous, she muttered. We're adults. That's exactly it. I said that from the very beginning. They lay in the darkness, each on their own side, keeping their distance as best they could. Isabella stared at the ceiling, thinking how much their lives had changed, and yet how little had changed between them. James? She whispered, not knowing if he was awake. I'm really sorry about your parents. Silence. Then, thank you. And again there was silence, long and heavy, before he spoke again. I missed this place more than I thought. Isabella turned her head, watching his profile in the moonlight. Around the house? About everything, he answered simply. And as she fell asleep, Isabella found herself wondering, what exactly did he mean by everything? And was she part of this everything? What she didn't know was that in 6 weeks, 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test would force them to face the inevitable, defining everything that had happened between them. How exactly could a pipe burst in a lake house in perfect weather? Isabella demanded, standing ankle-deep in the hallway, holding her laptop above her head. James emerged from the mechanical room, knee-deep in water, his expensive shirt clinging to him, and Isabella tried her best not to notice how good he looked in it. All the plumbing here is from the 70s, he said, running his hand through his damp hair. It should have been replaced 10 years ago. Isabella groaned. Graham always put off renovations. He said the house had character. Character is an interesting choice of words, James muttered, surveying the damage. I turned off the main valve, but there's definitely 2 inches of water on the first floor. They had just begun to find a fragile balance after 2 nights of forced cohabitation, when a blow, a real catastrophe, an appropriate metaphor for our relationship, Isabella thought grimly. Riley, Mrs. Chris is on vacation, she sighed. Maybe we should call a plumber for that kind of money? James was already rolling up his sleeves. I restored the irrigation system on the Austin campus myself last year. Is there anything you can't do? Isabella asked. Not quite. Managing to control her sarcasm. He looked up, his green eyes suddenly vulnerable. A lot of things. Let's start with the fact that I don't know how to maintain important relationships. His honesty stunned her. She didn't know what to say. But the moment was gone. I need tools. And towels. Lots of towels. 3 hours later, they were already in control of the situation. The water had been collected, the pipe had been temporarily sealed, and the things had been saved. "The bedroom upstairs is dry," James said as he came down. "But the kitchen and living room aren't yet." Isabella sat down on the step, exhausted and disheveled. "Great. There's a bedroom, but no food. I ordered delivery," he said, showing his phone. "It'll be here in half an hour." "You're surprisingly practical for a millionaire," she said wearily. He sat down next to her, their shoulders almost touching. "Money doesn't solve everything, no matter how you look at it," says the man who can buy anything. "Not everything," he answered quietly. Their eyes met. Something familiar fluttered in Isabella's chest. Something she had been trying to forget for 10 years. At that moment, the phone rang. "Hello. Yes, this is Isabella Davis." Her face darkened. "But we open next week? I understand. Thank you." She hung up the phone, completely dejected. "Problems?" James asked. The contractor for the children's zone refused. He found a more profitable order from a network company. She laughed bitterly. The irony is that an independent bookstore can't even compete in repairs. James thought for a second, then stood up resolutely. "Show me the plans." "What? Reconstruction?" "Plans. I want to see them." Isabella opened the blueprints on the miraculously surviving laptop. "Nothing special. We just wanted to turn an old storage room on the second floor into a children's area with reading nooks and good lighting." He studied the project with an attention that always amazed her. "There are almost no structural changes. All cosmetics and built-in furniture. That's why it's so disappointing. We're almost there, but we can't do it without a contractor." "I'll do it," he said simply. "You're going to fix up my bookstore?" She couldn't believe it. "I built my first company in a garage with my own hands. It's much easier, but you have a business. You're busy. I have a great team. They can handle a couple of days without me." He continued to leaf through the project. "These reading nooks, they look like the ones we dreamed of in that summer treehouse." Isabella's breath caught. The plans for the treehouse were the same ones they'd drawn when they were 17, creating a dream in the old oak tree behind the lake house. "Do you remember?" he asked quietly. "I remember everything, Isabella." His voice was low, filled with memories. The food delivery arrived before she could process his words. "It's impossible to live downstairs," she said. "We had to have a picnic, right?" On the bedroom floor, surrounded by blueprints and renovation plans. "If we change this part," James quickly sketched something on his notepad. "We can add a windowsill with storage space." Isabella leaned closer, their heads almost touching. It's perfect for a fairy tale corner. This easy understanding was at once familiar and frightening, as if 10 years of separation had disappeared in an instant. "Why did you never write?" Isabella blurted out before she could stop herself. James put down his pen. "I wrote? What?" "At first I sent you letters by email, then real letters when you stopped answering." Isabella shook her head, puzzled. "I never received any letters or emails. I sent them to your address at NYU, then to your grandmother's address." "But that's impossible." Isabella's voice faded. Fear crept up on her. "Unless your grandmother intercepted them." He looked closely at her face. "Unless ... She whispered. "Grandma always insisted that I move on after a breakup. Said, clean breakup heals faster." "That explains a lot," James said slowly. "But why did she make us meet again in the will?" James thought about it. Maybe she regretted it. Or maybe she just had terrible timing. Isabella couldn't help but laugh. "This sounds like Graham. First the medal, then the apologies. Never." "What?" Was in the letters? She asked, her heart beating faster. James turned away. It doesn't matter now. It was a long time ago. But it is important to me. Their eyes met, and the air between them filled with unspoken words. The first letters were about my parents, he finally admitted. Then I told you I was wrong, that Stanford wasn't worth losing you to, that I'd chosen the safe path instead of the right one. Isabella seemed unable to breathe. I thought you had forgotten me, that you had new, more important things to do. It couldn't have been better, James said quietly. The honesty in his voice squeezed her chest with decades of missed opportunities. A loud clap of thunder interrupted the moment, followed by a flash of lightning that illuminated the room. And then complete darkness. The power had gone out. You're kidding, Isabella muttered. A flood and a power outage. James's laughter was unexpectedly warm in the darkness. Your grandmother is probably controlling it from the other world. I wouldn't be surprised, Isabella agreed, feeling her phone to turn on the flashlight. A beam of light caught James's face, closer than she expected. In this harsh light he seemed younger, like the boy she once knew. Don't move, he said suddenly. You have something. His fingers brushed her cheek gently, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch sent an electricity through her that had nothing to do with the thunderstorm. We need to find candles, she said quickly, pulling away. That's right. Candles. His voice sounded tense. They managed to find emergency supplies in a cupboard on the top floor. Candles, matches, and an ancient transistor radio that crackled out storm warnings. A strong system is moving through the area. Roads are closed due to flooding. Residents are advised to stay indoors. It looks like we really are stuck here, Isabella said, placing candles around the room. It could have been worse, James replied, laying blankets by the window to watch the storm. We could end up locked in with people we really can't stand. Isabella glanced at him. You mean to tell me that I don't disgust you, Bennett? She asked with a smirk. I tried, he admitted, settling himself on the blankets. I tried for 10 years. The candlelight cast dramatic shadows across his face, highlighting the crisp line of his jaw and the subtle vulnerability in his gaze. Me too, Isabella admitted, sitting down next to her. It would be easier. Outside the windows, a storm was raging. Rain was lashing the glass. But in the room, lit only by candles, another element was brewing, a storm that had been building for 10 years. Tell me about your company, Isabella sighed, wrapping herself tightly in a blanket. The real story, not the one in Forbes. James smiled faintly. Honestly, it all started as a distraction. After my parents died, I needed something to take my mind off the grief. As the night deepened with each passing hour, they spoke more frankly than they had in years about his company's rocky start, her struggle to keep the bookstore alive in the digital age, the paths their lives had taken. I almost called you, Isabella admitted, when Graham was diagnosed. You were the only one I wanted to talk to, even though it seemed silly after all these years. It's not stupid, James replied quietly. When my mother was in the hospital, I was going to call you at least a dozen times. Why didn't you do it? He shrugged. Pride, fear. I convinced myself that you were better off without me. It wasn't your decision, Isabella said with a sting in her voice. I understand that now. Their eyes met in the flickering light. I knew it then too, he admitted. But I was 20, and I thought I knew everything. The candles burned dimly, their circle of light shrinking until they were close to each other, sharing warmth and whispers. Remember when we snuck out to watch the meteor shower? James asked, his voice shaking with the memory. And we got caught because you insisted on taking a telescope that didn't fit through the window. Isabella smiled. The telescope was top of the line, huge and awkward like my ego, he teased. Raleigh's. Words, she laughed. They sat shoulder to shoulder, the storm still roaring outside the windows. I missed your laugh, James said simply. Isabella turned to face him, their faces so close they seemed to share breath. James, she whispered. I know. We can't just pick up where we left off. Too much has happened. Too much time has passed, she agreed. But maybe. His eyes searched hers. Maybe we could start something over? The candle next to them sputtered and went out, plunging them into even deeper darkness. Isabella felt herself drawn to him, as if pulled by the gravity of what had been and what might yet be. His hand came up, cupping her cheek tenderly, his touch painfully gentle. Is this a terrible idea? She whispered against his lips. I guess, he said quietly. But I spent 10 years regretting leaving. I don't want to add another regret to the list. When their lips finally met, it was like coming home after a long journey. Familiar and new, cozy and exciting. James held her tighter, as if he was afraid she would disappear. The kiss deepened, filled with years of longing and unspoken words. Isabella's hands were tangled in his hair, her body remembering the touch. Even as her mind tried to comprehend what was happening. When they broke apart, breathing heavily, the storm outside seemed to have died down, although there was still no power. It was. She began. Yeah, James agreed, pressing his forehead to hers. Perhaps we should discuss this in the morning. Isabella nodded, caught up in the flood of emotions and revelations of the evening. They lay down on the bed, putting aside the illusion of the pillow barrier. As she drifted off to sleep in James's arms, she couldn't help but wonder. Were they making a terrible mistake, or were they, on the contrary, correcting the mistake that had led them astray 10 years ago? But what she couldn't know was much more. This night of candles, confessions and renewed passion would bring her more than just memories. In a few weeks, 2 pink stripes will force them to decide whether one night of recovery can bind them for life. Isabella woke to the sun streaming through the windows and the warmth of James's chest against her cheek. She stood still for a moment, listening to the steady beat of his heart, afraid to break the fragile bond between them. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear morning and a storm of tangled emotions. James shifted, instinctively hugging her tighter. Good morning, he whispered, his voice hoarse from sleep. Isabella pulled back slightly to look at him, suddenly shy. For a moment, they simply stared into each other's eyes, the weight of the night's confessions hanging between them. Good morning, he repeated with a hint of uncertainty, as if still digesting what had been said. Isabella sat up, tucking her dark hair behind her ear. It's all right. We just got caught up in the moment, the storm, the candlelight, the stories of my grandmother's intervention. Isabella, James interrupted, sitting down next to her. I meant every word. The sincerity in his voice made her heart skip a beat. We have a complicated history, he continued. I know 4 days won't erase 10 years, but I want to try for real. Before Isabella could answer, her phone vibrated a call from Peter at the bookstore. Izzy, thank God you answered. The roof is leaking right over the rare editions. The storm last night. I'm on my way. I'll be there soon, Isabella said quickly, jumping out of bed. Try to move as many books as you can. She turned to James with an apologetic look. A bookstore. I heard, he said, already putting on his clothes. I'll go with you. Rose Reed's looked like it had been hit by a storm, with water dripping from 3 different places on the ceiling and puddles growing on the floor. Peter and another employee were bustling about, moving books, but the rare collection that was. Isabella's pride and joy was already suffering. First editions. She breathed, rushing toward an antique glass case containing priceless volumes. James was already examining the ceiling. The main leak is right above. We need to get up on the roof, Like this? Isabella pointed to his expensive clothes. I keep my work uniform in the car, he answered calmly, heading for the door. In 10 minutes. James went from being a polished businessman to an experienced craftsman confidently managing the renovation. First, we need to drain the water, then temporarily seal the roof. He carefully examined the ceiling. Is there access to the attic? Behind the staff break room. Isabella nodded. For several hours, James worked tirelessly alongside Isabella and her team. In the pouring rain, he climbed onto the roof, patched up the biggest holes, and constructed a system of tarps and buckets to protect the valuable books. Isabella looked at him with quiet amazement. The arrogant billionaire she knew had given way to a man who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty when it mattered. He's not who I thought he was, Peter muttered next to her, watching James set up a makeshift support. You've been talking about him for so many years. I'm not sure who he really is myself, Isabella admitted. Or maybe I've just forgotten. By evening, the crisis was under control. Isabella surveyed the aftermath. Several books had been damaged by the water, but the most valuable had been saved thanks to James's quick action. Thank you, she said quietly when they were finally alone in her small office. You shouldn't have done that, she said wearily, looking at him. He leaned against her desk, his shoulders slumped with fatigue. It was necessary? Because of the will? Isabella asked, trying to understand. He shook his head. Because it's important to you. It means it's important to me, too. The simple sincerity in his voice made Isabella's heart clench. I was thinking about what you said this morning. She began. About trying again. James straightened up, his face calm, with a hint of worry in the air. And it's scary. Isabella admitted. The idea of letting you back into my life after everything. I know, she continued, meeting his gaze. But maybe there are things to be afraid of. A slow smile spread across James's face. It wasn't the polished, public-facing smile she'd seen in photos of him at tech conferences, but the real, slightly lopsided smile that was always just for her. So you'll let me take you to dinner? He asked, not at the lake house, but on a real date. Isabella smiled back. I think I would like it. The restaurant James chose was elegant, but no frills, a small Italian cafe with views of the harbor, twinkling lights, and a jazz quartet playing softly in the corner. You remember? Isabella said as the waiter brought her favorite bottle of wine. Chianti Classico 2015. You always said that after 2016, the wine wasn't the same. She raised an eyebrow. It's a little scary that you remember my wine preferences. 10 years ago. I told you, James replied, his green eyes reflecting the candlelight. I remember everything about you. As they shared pasta and conversation, Isabella felt the years between them dissolve, not disappear, but become less significant than they had seemed before. What would you do? She asked, twirling linguine around her fork. If you got my letters? James thought, slowly swirling his wine glass. Probably transfer to NYU, or at least try to convince you to give long distance a real chance. Your company would start in New York, not Silicon Valley. He shrugged. It was never about the place, but about my stubbornness to stay where I was. Would you change your whole life for me? Isabella asked in surprise. In an instant, James answered without hesitation. I was just too young and proud to admit it in time. His simple confidence made her throat tighten with emotion. Later, walking along the embankment, James took her hand, a gesture so natural that it seemed they never stopped doing it. Can I ask you something? Isabella ventured, looking at their intertwined fingers. You haven't had a serious relationship in all these years. In the tabloids, you're always with different women. James winced. The tabloids exaggerate. There were a few, but none lasted more than a few months. What about you? One serious guy in college. Then, she shrugged. The bookstore became my priority. Easier than explaining to every date why I have a wall of tagged breakup poems. James laughed, but then became serious. We wasted a lot of time, didn't we? Perhaps, Isabella smiled. Or we just needed this time to become who we are now. When? They returned to the lake house. The atmosphere between them had changed, filled with possibilities, and the finally acknowledged weight of a shared history. We still have flooding downstairs, Isabella noted, kicking off her shoes at the entrance. I called a restoration company, James replied. They'll be here tomorrow. Of course, he organized everything, efficient as always. They stood in the hallway, suddenly awkward despite the ease of the evening. It was nice today, Isabella said quietly. Yes, James agreed, taking a step closer. Although there was something I wanted to do all night. His hand moved up to her cheek, his thumb gently tracing the curve of her lower lip can. In response, Isabella stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. Unlike their first kiss, born of the storm and confession, this one began tenderly, with a question, a proposal. But when James's arms wrapped around her waist and pulled her towards him, the kiss became more insistent. Isabella's fingers tangled in his hair as he pressed her against the wall, their body pressed tightly against each other, evoking memories of teenage embraces in this same house and awakening desires much older. Isabella, he whispered against her neck, his voice hoarse. We should stop. Why? She breathed out, not breaking away from him. Because if we don't stop now, His eyes were full of desire when he pulled away. Isabella made her decision, taking his hand and leading him to the stairs. Then don't stop, she whispered. James paused, studying her face. Are you sure? I don't want to rush things. Isabella's smile was both gentle and determined. James, we've waited 10 years. I think we both realized that neither of us is in a hurry. He laughed softly and followed her upstairs to the bedroom they shared. In the moonlight filtering through the windows, they slowly and carefully rediscovered each other, each touch an apology and a promise. James whispered her name like a prayer as they merged in one movement, his hands exploring the woman she had become, not forgetting the girl she once was. I never stopped loving you, he confessed, pressing his skin against hers. Even when I tried to forget. Isabella's heart soared in response to the words she had been waiting for 10 years. And I never stopped. Afterwards, lying in his arms, she ran her fingers over his chest, marveling at how something could be so familiar and new at the same time. 2 more nights, James muttered into her hair. And then what? Isabella sat up to look at him. Are you talking about the inheritance or about us? About us, he answered firmly. The inheritance is not important, she smirked, teasing the millionaire. I'm serious, he said. Regardless of whether Grandma's will forces us to be together, I want to be with you. In Portland, New York, anywhere. Would you really move the company headquarters for me? She asked, half jokingly. In an instant, he replied, completely serious. Or we could split the time. A key to technology is flexibility, and the bookstore could become a chain, James suggested. Or remain your independent kingdom, where I will often come and support without embarrassment. Isabella laughed, then looked serious. You really thought this through. I've had 10 years to figure out what I would do differently if I had a second chance. His fingers touched her cheek gently. I'm not going to let him go. As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, Isabella allowed herself to believe what had seemed impossible just a few days ago. I love you, she whispered, and the words sounded both majestic and natural. James's arms tightened around her. I love you too, always have. But what they didn't know was that in the coming weeks, 2 pink stripes would accelerate all their cautious plans. forcing them to decide whether their renewed love was enough to become a family sooner than anyone could have imagined. Isabella stared at the pregnancy test lying on the bathtub, two crisp pink lines on white plastic. She picked up a second test, then a third, all with the same result. Staring back at her, "This can't be true," she whispered to her reflection. Her hands shaking. The irony of the situation was not lost on her. After all these years of separation, when she and James had finally found each other, when their relationship had blossomed naturally, on its own terms, now this sudden complication. That night at the lake house, they were careful, mostly. But in the heat of reconciliation, in the storm of emotion of being together again, the phone vibrated. A message from James. The meeting ended early. Dinner at 7 is still on. Over the past 6 weeks, since the terms of the will were fulfilled, they found their rhythm. James has extended his stay in Portland, working remotely and helping renovate the children's section of Rose's Reads. The project is nearly complete, a magical space with reading nooks, dreamy murals, and custom bookshelves that opens. Next week, their relationship developed with a restraint that seemed both new and familiar, as if they were continuing a conversation that had been interrupted long ago, rather than starting all over again. And now this. Isabella replied, "See you then," unable to find other words. Child of James Bennett. How would he react? They hadn't even discussed children as a theoretical possibility in the future, let alone as a reality right now. Her hand instinctively fell on her still flat stomach, where the main consequence of their 7 nights together was growing, something that would bind them together longer than Granny had ever imagined. "Bella, you've been quiet all evening. Is everything okay?" James asked, sitting in his rented apartment in the city center. The remains of dinner lay between them, but Isabella barely touched the food, her mind occupied with the difficult news. "I'm fine," she answered automatically, but then caught herself. "Actually, no, I'm not fine." James put down his glass of wine, concern appearing on his face. "What's happened?" "The bookstore. Your grandmother's legacy." Isabella took a deep breath. There are no easy words, so I'll just say it. She looked him in the eye. "I'm pregnant." The words hung between them as if time had stood still. James froze, his face unreadable. "Are you sure?" he finally asked, controlling his voice. 3 tests, all positive?" James nodded slowly, digesting the news. "Understand." Isabella felt her heart tighten at his restrained response. What had she expected? Joyful exclamations? Horror? Any of those would have been better than this cautious neutrality. "I know this isn't what we planned," she continued, the words flowing. "We just found each other again, and it's still so new. And I completely understand if you need time, or space, or—" "Stop, please," James interrupted, reaching across the table to take her hand. She fell silent, watching him collect his thoughts. "I'm not upset," he said carefully. "I'm just processing the information. It's unexpected." "That's one of the words," Isabella answered with a bitter smile. James stood up, walked around the table, and knelt down next to her chair. "Look at me, please." When she looked up, his green eyes were filled with such power that it took her breath away. "I love you," he said simply. "That hasn't changed, and it won't change. This news is surprising, yes, but it doesn't change my feelings for you." Relief washed over Isabella, and tears came to her eyes. "Really? Really?" His hand came up to gently touch her cheek. "Although I have one question." "Which?" A shadow of vulnerability crossed James's face. "How do you feel about this? About us having a child? My child?" The question caught her off guard. In her anxiety about his reaction, she had not had time to recognize her own feelings. "I'm scared," she admitted. "But there's a part of me that thinks of a little girl with your eyes, or a boy who sorts toys by size and color. James's smile was soft. With your stubborn determination and love of stories. Aren't you panicking? Isabella asked, looking for an answer in his face. Oh, I'm definitely panicking, he said confidently with a playful smile. I'm just keeping it inside for now, planning on having a real attack tomorrow between conference calls. Isabella laughed, the tension easing from her shoulders. We'll get through this, James continued, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. Together, whatever you want to do. The wording caught her attention. Are you asking if I want to keep the child? I acknowledge that it is ultimately your body and your choice, he explained. But I want you to know that I am completely with you, no matter what your decision. Isabella felt a surge of gratitude for his concern. I want this child, she said. It's unexpected and scary, but I want it. Relief crossed James's face. Thank God, he whispered. Because I want to too. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. I never thought I'd get a second chance with you, let alone a family. It's all happening faster than I expected, but that doesn't change how right it feels. Your company, Isabella began, your life in Silicon Valley, ... Much less important than you and our baby, James interrupted firmly. We'll handle the logistics. You can run a company from anywhere. But a family needs roots. Practical, she teased softly. One of us has to be, he smiled, then grew serious. I was serious before. I'm moving to Portland. The bookstore is your legacy, your passion. I won't ask you to leave it. What about your legacy? Isabella asked. Your company? James's hand slid down to her stomach, resting there with reverent tenderness. I think I'm looking at my most important legacy right now. These simple words brought new tears to Isabella's eyes. I have something for you, James said suddenly. Standing up, I was going to give it to you at the opening of the reading room next week, but now is the time. He disappeared into his home office and returned with a small, neatly wrapped box. Isabella carefully unwrapped the gift, a first edition of The Velveteen Rabbit, her favorite childhood book that her grandmother had read to her countless times. James, she breathed, opening the thin cover. How are you? I've been looking for it for weeks, he admitted. I remember how your copy fell apart from constant reading. On the inside cover was a simple inscription. Isabella, some things become real through love. As we always do. James, it's perfect, she whispered through tears, looking at him. For our baby's first library. James smiled, but then hesitated. There's something else I wanted to ask you. Something I've been carrying with me for a long time. He took a small velvet box out of his pocket, and Isabella's breath caught in her throat. It may seem hasty, he began, but considering we've loved each other for over 10 years, with 10 years between, it seems long overdue. He opened the box, and inside sparkled a magnificent sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds. Vintage, elegant, and perfectly suited to her style. I'm not asking you because of the baby, James quickly clarified. I bought this 3 weeks ago. I was waiting for the right moment. 3 weeks ago? Isabella repeated, amazed. As I said, he smiled, when you get a second chance at something that seemed lost forever, there's no time to waste. Took her hand. Isabella Davis, will you marry me? Wait, she interrupted, raising her free hand to stop him. Before you finish, there's something I need to know. He waited patiently, despite the vulnerability in his eyes. Are you sure you want this? She asked softly. Not just for the baby, but for me. The bookstore, Portland, a life so different from the one you built. I've never been so sure of anything, he answered without hesitation. The life I built was successful, but empty. Every achievement, every step, I always wished you were there. What's the point of success without sharing it with someone who knew you before you were someone special. His words touched her heart deeply. "You are always special, James Bennett," she whispered. "Before the millions, before the company, you were a special boy with a telescope that didn't fit in the window." His smile was dazzling. "It's true?" "Yes," Isabella answered simply. "It's always been yes." As James slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her close, Isabella marveled at the unexpected turns life had taken. From forced intimacy to genuine love, from reconciliation to starting a family, her grandmother's intervention had brought them to where they were always meant to be. That night, as they lay together planning the future and the nursery, Isabella placed her hand on James's stomach. "Your grandmother would be unbearably smug right now," she whispered. James laughed, the sound humming softly in her ear. "She claimed that she planned it all, including the child." "You know," Isabella said thoughtfully, "given her habit of interfering, I wouldn't be surprised." "A 7-night clause," James said thoughtfully. "Time for both reconciliation and procreation." "Exactly," Isabella added with a smile. His arms tightened around her. "Although I think we found our way, despite her plans or because of them," Isabella countered. As they drifted off to sleep, Isabella secretly thanked her enigmatic grandmother for the impossible will that had brought James back into her life, and for the invisible force that had created a new life inside her. Some legacies, it turns out, are worth far more than property or money. Some are measured in second chances and new beginnings. "James, we're late," Isabella called, carefully descending the stairs of their renovated lake house, one arm carefully supporting her now very large belly. "Just a minute," his voice came from the children's room. "I'm just finishing the installation." Isabella smiled and shook her head. Over the past few months, the nursery had become James's obsession, a perfect combination of technology and fairy tale, a reflection of both. What had started as a simple room had become a complex space with a star projection on the ceiling, individual bookshelves filled with classics, and a state-of-the-art surveillance system that was likely to violate more than one privacy law. She found him on the stairs, installing tiny twinkling lights arranged in a constellation pattern above the crib. "The grand opening is in 45 minutes, she reminded him. "And right now I'm moving at the speed of a sedated turtle." James looked down, his face softening at the sight of Isabella, 8 months pregnant, radiating beauty in a flowing emerald dress that matched the color of her eyes and the ring on her finger. "It's worth being late," he said, coming down and kissing her tenderly on the forehead. "Our daughter must have reliable navigation of the night sky for all her midnight wanderings," Isabella teased. "Exactly," James smiled, placing his hand on her stomach. "She's already an explorer." Isabella was surprised every day by the changes in James. The calculating businessman still ran the company remotely with impressive efficiency, but he had become softer, learned to find balance and value moments more than achievements. "Come on, tech genius," Isabella said, taking his hand. "The bookstore is about to have its grand opening, and the children's reading room is said to be absolutely stunning." "The most suitable," he answered with false modesty. "The contractor is questionable." Rose Reed's was buzzing with excitement. After months of renovations that saw the children's section vastly expanded, with a cafe, meeting space, and technology center added, the beloved bookstore was a true community hub. "This is magnificent," Peter whispered as Isabella and James entered through the service entrance. "People have been queuing since dawn." The transformation was astounding. The building's historic character was preserved, but everything felt updated, thoughtful, and functional. The rare collection was now climate-controlled. The main floor featured cozy reading nooks among the shelves, and a cafe offered local treats and expertly brewed coffee. But the real pearl was waiting at the top. "Ready?" James asked. squeezing Isabella's hand before leading the first group into the children's reading room. "More than," she replied, squeezing his fingers. The design of the reading room was a secret, only that it was dedicated to Eleanor, Rose, Isabella's grandmother. When she cut the ribbon and opened the door, the air filled with gasps of admiration. It was a magical place, a literary kingdom where books reigned supreme in a fairy tale setting. Tree-shaped bookshelves reached up to a ceiling, painted like a summer sky. Reading nooks, from pirate ships to dragon caves, invited young readers to immerse themselves in a world of stories. In the center was a circular area with soft cushions where the stories took place, and a magnificent chair carved in the shape of an open book became the heart of the tale. "This ... Isabella whispered, overcome with emotion, even though she saw how everything was coming together into reality. "Everything we envisioned in those treehouse plans," James finished, wrapping his arm around her waist. "It just took us a while, too. Build it." Along one wall stood a special cabinet containing a collection of beloved classics. In the center, a first edition of The Velveteen Rabbit, now with a small plaque. Ellen Rose Bennett, brought into this world by the love of her mother and father. Isabella felt her eyes fill with tears. "I can't believe you did all this." "We did," James corrected gently. "Your vision, my execution, the perfect partnership." As the children and parents filled the space with excited exclamations, Isabella noticed a small door in the corner that she had not seen before. "What is this?" she asked, pointing. James's smile became mysterious. "A surprise for you?" He led her to the door and opened it, revealing a small, perfectly decorated office, a cozy workspace with a desk overlooking the street, shelves for her favorite books, and photographs of their life adorning the walls. "Grandma's will said the bookstore was your inheritance," James explained. "But I wanted you to have your own little corner inside, a place where you could write those children's books you've been planning, or just get away from it all when motherhood and business got too much." Isabella turned to him, unable to find words of gratitude. "You hate it," he said, misunderstanding her silence. "I can change it." "That's perfect," she interrupted. "I'm just wondering how lucky I am," says the woman who's about to give birth to the heir to a tech empire and still chooses to live above. "A bookstore," he teased. After the first excursions, Isabella was tired. James showed her to the new office and closed the door on the happy chaos outside. "I was thinking," he said, settling down next to her on the comfortable windowsill, "about names." "We agreed on Eleanor Rose," Isabella replied, slightly puzzled, "for the first and middle names." "Yes, but what about the last name?" Isabella bowed her head. "Bennett is a very respectable name." "I was thinking Bennett Davis," James suggested. "Or Davis Bennett, whichever you prefer. Do you want it hyphenated?" He took her hand, suddenly serious. "I want her to carry the legacy of both of us, just as I want you to keep your name, if you wish. The store is Davis. Your identity is Davis. I don't need you to become a Bennett to know you're mine." The thoroughness of his words brought fresh tears to Isabella's eyes. "Pregnancy hormones make me cry over trifles," she complained, wiping her cheeks. "A convenient excuse," James chuckled, then became serious. "This morning I received the final documents from the inheritance lawyer, and my grandmother's will is fully executed. The house on the lake is now officially ours. The bookstore is yours. And my investment portfolio is officially boring." Isabella laughed. "I still can't believe you donated a large portion to literacy programs." "It was appropriate," James shrugged. "Besides, I have more than enough. Our daughter will have more than enough." Ellen Rose Davis Bennett. Isabella tried the name out loud. "Perfect." At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Peter looked out apologetically. "Sorry to disturb you, but there is someone here you might want to meet." He stepped back, opening the way for an older man with kind eyes and a formal suit. Mrs. Ricks sent me, he said. I'm Harold Winters. Used to be your grandmother's lawyer for the estate, before Mr. Pearson. Isabella and James exchanged confused glances. Mr. Pearson was handling the will, James said carefully. Yes, according to my instructions, Mr. Winters nodded. I retired 3 years ago, but your grandmother asked me to deliver this letter personally a year after the execution of the will. He handed Isabella a yellowed envelope with her name written in her grandmother's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, Isabella opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. My dear Isabella, she read aloud, if you are reading this, then my little experiment has succeeded better than I expected. Harold will only deliver this letter under certain conditions. If you and James have reconciled, if the bookstore is thriving, and if new life has emerged from your reunion. Isabella's eyes widened as she met James's incredulous gaze. Yes, my dear, she continued reading, I had it all planned out. The letters I intercepted were a mistake I deeply regret. A 7-night stipulation is my attempt to correct that mistake. Sometimes love needs a little push, especially when two incredibly stubborn people are involved. James shook his head in disbelief. She couldn't have known about the baby. No, I couldn't know you were waiting. Isabella laughed through her tears, but I hoped that forced closeness would awaken something that had never truly died. The love you had was rare, the kind that happens once in a lifetime. I know. I've experienced it twice, and that makes me either very happy or very greedy. Mr. Winters smiled quietly as he moved toward the door to leave them alone. Forgive the old woman for interfering, Isabella continued, her voice shaking with emotion. And know that wherever I am, I say with a smug smile, I told you so. With all my love, forever, Graham. Isabella looked up from the letter to see James wiping his eyes. She arranged everything, he said in amazement. Even our little one. Not everything, Isabella corrected, taking his hand. She created the opportunity, and we made the choice. There was a noise outside. Through a small window, they saw children gathering for the first official reading in the new reading room. Shall we go? James asked, helping Isabella up. Wait. She stopped him, pulling him close. Before we go back there, I want to say thank you for what? For coming back, staying, building this life with me, better than which I could not even imagine. James took her face in his hands. Isabella Davis, soon to be Davis Bennett. I spent 10 years trying to build a life without you. By any measure, it was a success, but empty where it really counted. That you, the baby, the bookstore, our home, that's what success is. Everything else is just a ticking clock. Back. At the party, Isabella settled into a reading chair, surrounded by eager children. James stood nearby, watching with undisguised admiration as she began to read from a tattered copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. What does it mean to be real? Asked a rabbit one day. Does it mean having something inside that buzzes and a handle sticking out? Isabella's eyes met James's above the children's heads. You're not born real, said the fir. You become real when a child loves you for a very, very long time. Not just plays with you, but really loves you. Then you become real. As if on cue, Eleanor Rose gave a strong push, and Isabella, with a surprised laugh, stopped mid-sentence. Someone wants to join in the reading, she explained to the curious children, placing her hand on her stomach. Later, in the evening, walking home to the lake house, holding hands, the sun turning the water gold and pink. What are you thinking about? Isabella asked, clinging to him. I'm grateful for your grandmother's intervention, James admitted. 7 nights and everything changed. For a second chance and a third, Isabella added. guiding his hand to where their daughter was kicking insistently. And for every chance. After that, 3 weeks later, Eleanor Rose Davis Bennett made her dramatic entrance into the world 2 weeks early, and, as James noted with a smile and a hint of resignation, completely ignoring the carefully calculated birth schedule he had drawn up. Already defying all expectations, Isabella laughed, holding their newborn daughter tenderly to her, while James sat beside her in the hospital bed, both scared and confused. "She has your eyes," he whispered, gently touching the baby's dark, thin hair. "And your sense of timing," Isabella smiled, remembering how she had interrupted an important meeting with her appearance. "The best interruption of my life." "Hello, Eleanor," James said quietly, taking his daughter gently into his arms with a reverent tenderness that Isabella had never seen in him before. "I'm your dad. I'm sure I'll make a lot of mistakes, but I promise to learn from each one. Your mother and I have been waiting for you for a long time." When James, the tech millionaire, former emotional recluse, and now madly in love father, tenderly kissed the little girl's forehead, Isabella knew with complete certainty that her grandmother had given her the greatest inheritance of all, not a bookstore or a mansion by the lake, but a second chance at love and the family she had always dreamed of. Sometimes the most valuable legacies can't be written down in a will or measured in money. Sometimes they can be measured in the 7 nights that changed everything.